All systems go. Cleared for takeoff. What's up, everyone? Tyler Tamboline here, a.k.a. ToeTagginTambo, back with my guy, Hoopster. It's the final major of the season, the Open. We were up early/late last week talking Scottish Open. We're back again this week for the Open here on the SHIPIT Nation YouTube station. So do us a favor on the way in, hit that like button. If you haven't subscribed already, do so now. There's 2.1K. Now we're up to the drive for 3K is on. I will be giving away 2 memberships, monthly memberships, that is, to shipitnation.com. After we get off the show, we've got the 2 winners that we're going to pick out, and we'll tweet those out. So if anybody who commented last week on this show, it was the winner and the hashtag SHIPIT is all you had to do to get into the draw. Hoop, bring you in, man. A very fun Scottish Open. We both had pretty big weeks. Yeah. A lot of members had some big weeks, and now we've got more great new things to talk about here at SHIPIT Nation, and we'll go through everything as usual on the show when we get to it.
Yeah, it was a good week last week. And, not only was it good for me personally, but it's like, man, you go to the content, and the content was just on point. So, my main team did really, really well. And that team was fully reflected in the content. And my core, had Tommy Fleetwood, had Connors, can't remember the third guy, but it was just on point. The tier rankings, like you highlighted, had just all the best guys ranked properly almost in those tier rankings. And, I had a really good week. I know you did as well, and I know a ton of members did. So very rewarding on all levels. Could have been even better, but I'm not greedy. I take the big wins and move on. Woke up. I don't know. It's just a funny story because I woke up 7:30 Eastern or something, and they're still playing, getting to the end, and pulled up DraftKings, and I was winning like 90 grand. I was like, oh, sweet. Maybe I'll go, wake up, get down there, check out some of the golf. It's just one of those situations. As soon as I got down there, double bogey for Fleetwood at the end, bogey for someone else, and then Hatton finished with like a double bogey too. So still big day. I think $30,000-$40,000 range. We take that for sure. Could have been much better, but like I tweeted out, we're not going to stop there. We're gonna go back to back here this week and get the big boy prizes at the Open Championship. I've been digging in all week. I know you have as well. And content is already starting to drop over there. But the plan is, like I said, to go back to back, and I'm feeling good about it this week.
Yeah, huge week there. Like I said, a lot of the members. I got a King of the Desert ticket, and everything was in the tier rankings there. Like I said, we have Fleetwood, Hatton, Fowler. We had Fox, McIntyre, and who was the other guy? It was Bobby Mack, Fox. Oh, and Woodland, who was up there for a little bit. He fell back, but just saying that, you had Davis Riley in the low Ks. And that's the thing. There's only the 2 of us, so that was there. But we didn't have our projections on the site yet, which we'll talk about in a second. But we were listing the test version of the projections. It was the last. We did 4 weeks internal testing to launch these things out. Felt pretty good about them after the first 2 weeks, but we wanted to get 2 birdie fests, 2 a little bit tougher events with stronger fields. Worked out well. Guess who our number 1 guy was in the projections last week? Was Rory McIlroy. So awesome to see that. We'll see how they shake out this week. We'll talk a little bit about projections in general, I think, on this show, just to talk through it, because I think people think you get projections, let's just go plug them all in, run the optimal, boom, you win no matter what. It's not how I use them. Again, it can hurt you too. I'll tell a little story in a second, but just saying that, Hoop, it was a very good week last week for SHIPIT Nation members. If you guys haven't yet signed up, now is the time to do so. Get in. Hoop's got some of his content up already. We've got the projections. We've got ownership projections for the main slate for DraftKings. They're already preloaded, and we just did the latest update to the solver. So for any members watching that want to go get in there, the solver is who we have our partnership with. Incredible optimizer, easy to use. They already have the tee times baked in. The pricing setup is there. The ownership percentage now is ours pushed over with our projections. You can see the point per dollar ranking, and then you can start building your lineups out using all the rules and settings. So definitely check that out. If you are already a member of the solver for just MLB and using just our MLB projections, you can email support@thesolver.com. Just let them know you want to switch over to all sports. They'll actually help prorate your deal over, and then you'll, of course, get all of our projections as long as you're signed up for a member at SHIPIT Nation. So let's talk about projections real quick. Grand scheme, too, Hoop, like before we get into this slate and everything with the Open. Had like projections wise, I know you use them for some sports, maybe not for all. Stats you use for some, but you're not a big stats guy in general. Obviously, baked into these are a lot of things like stats and certain course history and other factors in the back end, sort of a secret blend, if you will, how you make it up. Nobody tells the exact recipe, but just to break it down, how do you go about using projections? Because it's a huge deal for us. And now we are officially going to have projections for all 6, which is the 6 major sports that we carry, because MMA will be launching this week as well for main slate fighter projections, point projections, as well as ownership projections pushed into the solver as well with all our MLB stuff.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, certain sports, I think projections are more valuable. I mean, the number one sport for projections by far is NBA. And you know that for sure because you've used these specific NBA projections to have a ton of success last year in those live final seats and then parlaying that, I believe, into like $150,000, which was very impressive last season. So NBA is number one, but the other sports, they are important as well. And, so for PGA, a lot of different ways you can use them to identify the best value plays, to identify some overpriced guys, identify some low-owned guys. I mean, just very important, just part of the equation that goes into everything. I obviously look at them every week, looked at ours already, and they've been doing very well. Like you said, these last couple of weeks, had Rory last week pegged. And, this week going through them, there are a few plays that kind of stand out. If you're someone that uses them, if you're someone that uses multiple, a lot of people I know use multiple projections for each sport. This is one that you're going to want to add into the equation because a lot of sites in the industry now is just copycat stuff. They're just kind of copying what other sites do and change it by a little bit. That is not the case here with these ones. These are, ours. And we have, like you said, we have all the work that goes in behind the scenes to make it all happen and come out. So very important addition. And like you said, now we're going to have them for every sport that we offer, which is something we're very excited for.
Yeah, and that's a key point that you just brought up. That's the thing, especially when it came to NBA last season. You mentioned that, and it'll be the same for all sports. It's been the same in MLB as well. That's why we don't have the same. Not everybody's winning with the same duplicated lineup just based on hoops content or Nades's core or something like that. Everyone is using the projections in their own way, the tools in their own way. It'll be the same for golf, the same for MMA, and it'll also be the same in the sense that when the industry is winning with the same set of projections, there's really good PGA projections out there right now. Don't need to name them all, but just to say they're out there. But when those win, typically you're battling with so many others to win on the same night. When ours win, we'll be the only ones that win because they're not the same as the general public. They're not going to win every week. No one's saying that, but that's the point, especially with NBA last year. A lot of people use the same projections and for good reason. And that's why they cost more money and all these other factors. We've priced everything accordingly. It's included. Amandeep asked a quick question here, said, where do we get the optimizer? Is it included in the subscription? Optimizer is an optional tool. We do not have our own. There's lots of sites that don't have their own and they outsource it to somebody else. What our setup is the price that you get with SHIPITNation.com includes everything for the one low price. So you get all the projections, the ownership projections, all the tools, the content. You get in the Discord, which is members only. You get all of that included. If you want to add the optimizer, the solver, who we've partnered with, is our favorite partner. They are the similar mindset and type of the best value, all the best of innovation of all the other optimizers into one for the best price. That's kind of what we're doing with the content side of things to be a little bit different, bring it all together. And then the angle they have is you can actually get it for as low as $24.99 a month for your single sport, $39.99 a month. Sorry, I should say it this way. $24.99 a month for one sport, $59.99 a month for all sports. But if you buy a 6-month package with them, which is the max you can go, it's $239 and change. You get 6 months included, which is a value of $39.99 a month. So get as low as $39.99 a month. You pair that together with our $59, less than $100 gets you everything SHIPITNation.com offers, plus a great optimizer that actually pulls it all directly and uploads for you so that you have it all there. You don't need to run around copying, pasting, downloading CSVs, whatever, unless you want to. That's there as well. We also made some changes to the site, so you'll see it as soon as maybe tomorrow, but probably today. If you see PGA, it's now all in a sortable, nice-looking sheet that you can sort it out. We have it coming for MMA already in the works. That'll be out this week. And then MLB is going to convert. So for members that wanted by position, by slate, by that, not on the tools yet. I'll be clear. Hitter rankings, pitcher rankings, all the rankings will stay the same for now. But projections, even if you don't have the solver, will at least be sortable and you can filter it so that you'll be able to see both. So a little bit of housekeeping up front. The last thing I'll say on projections in general, because it's not really just our stuff, just about them in general. You mentioned one more good point, is that's what I was going to say. So at the U.S. Open, first time I tested our projections, Boomer had put a lot of work. It was actually his version 2 of these projections and testing them out. So I had not been around for version 1. Version 2, when I tested it, though, the first time I did was US Open. Me being an MME player and looking at ownership and fade this, update this, boost this guy, change it down. Like projections, typically you just want to trust them and roll them out and then make some changes. All I really swapped was how I set it up. I didn't want all the chalk together. Well, of course, at the US Open, it just absolutely smashes. The projections were like 9 of the top 10 finished in the top 20, including the winner. The only guy out was Justin Rose, who had just missed, obviously hurt a lot of us, but I didn't get to that because I played with them too much. To Hoop's point, like you mentioned earlier, guys, whether it's ours or other projections, you don't necessarily just want to live and die by those projections. What many sites are now doing, they have simulations or they have a person who they'll send them to and they get them simmed out to find out what are the highest ROI lineups within that set of projections. I don't think many people are doing that. I'm just saying if you were, you have to remember that. So even when you see the best of the best that you consider your favorite or top end DFS players say, I'm using these projections, they're not using them the same way that you would. So use them how you feel best about it. But again, remember they're a baseline. In our case, it's a median number. So it's very little separation, maybe at the guys at the very top. But now what you use those for is you start to learn, okay, this guy's going to get the late steam for ownership or more people. Now I see multiple sites, like Hoop said, people have multiple sites worth of projections. They say, I've got this site, this site, this site. Well, wait a minute. I didn't really hear anyone mention Patrick Reed until today, Wednesday, on some of these shows. But now I see every projection site likes Patrick Reed. And then you wonder why, when we get to Thursday at lock, people say, holy smokes, Patrick Reed just got steamed to the moon. How did that happen? Here's why. All these sites are on Patrick Reed, and that's what ended up packing it in there to put him up to the top where nobody was expecting it. Those paying attention to these projections were expecting it. So again, use accordingly. There's lots of ways you can use them. We'll have more tutorials and things like that over at ShipItNation.com to help you guys through that. But like our guy Landa says in the chat, he says, Tambo just said as gospel, projection should be one piece of your decision-making. That's exactly it. And it can be used to bake in the correlation, the game theory, the leverage, depending on what sport you're playing within. So hopefully that articulated it a little bit for you guys so you know what we're talking about. If you haven't yet done so, get to ShipItNation.com. You can still lock in the $59 a month, like the Solver deal. You can actually lock in even lower. If you pay for the annual, $5.99, it locks you in for everything we have to offer, works out to $49 a month, which is equivalent to our original offer that we had on the site for 1 week only. So check that out. Hoop, let's dive in, man. It's going to be a fun one. We get the last major of the season. We're going over to play the Open. Let's look at the weather first. Anything you saw there with the weather? They have a Hoy Lake weather tower on Windfinder. Most people have looked at this already. You go to the super forecast. Don't see too much, but obviously weather can change on a dime. In Scotland, anything with the weather or anything you would just say on that or take it away as we go through it?
Yeah, it's going to be similar to the approach last week where I don't think, for the 4-day overall slate, there's any true advantage to be had. If you're someone that plays in wave stacks naturally, yeah, go for it. We always talk about it on the show. I know you love doing that. Yeah, go for it, do it, but I don't see a distinct advantage one wave or the other. It's going to be more on the showdown stuff, which obviously we have content for round 2, 3, and 4 shows for round 2 and 3. Weather will be much more of a factor, I believe, on those shows opposed to this show where we're covering the main slate.
Yeah, and should be noted, I think it's going to be 3 p.m. Eastern for tomorrow's show. And then on Friday, we're going to play it by ear. People have really liked the show where we sort of show up with half hour to go in the round, do like a mini cut sweat at the end, and then pile it into the show. So we'll have you covered on that one. We'll announce it on our Twitter. Our Twitter, by the way, for those that have been lagging behind, back and ready to go. You can go to @ShipItNation on Twitter. Follow there. It's free. Check out all the updates you get. Subscribe to this channel for all the shows. All our shows are free. We don't have a premium show anymore. We talked about that from the beginning. We thought about it. Premium shows just are not the way we see the business going. So for us, all the content staying premium, doing these a little bit earlier, and then being in the Discord to support, talk through strategy, game theory. How now it's going to be talking about how we can use these projections and what we can do differently than what the rest of the market is doing or where we see things different that way. So definitely a great place to be if you're looking for a community to hang out in. ShipItNation.com. Check it out. $59 a month or $49 if you pay for it annually. All right, Hoop, next big discussion, this pricing, right? Everyone's talking about it, going nuts, going crazy. I mean, first of all, it's probably right. We got a fair priced Scotty Scheffler for once, 12.5. They're not going to go much higher than that. They're finally getting up to this number, but at least makes sense for the sort of insane run that this guy has been on, even without the putter, even without anything. Last week, again, another top 5 for him. He just goes out and continues to dominate. 12.5 for him. The one thing about that, though, is it did bring in, they brought a 5K range not everybody watches every show. I know some people in the chat, I already see them. We're watching the Mayo show earlier with myself, so I won't rehash the whole spiel, but I'll let you go first and get your thoughts anyway, because I'm not sure where you're at on this. What do you think about the pricing for this week? What stands out to you from that?
I like it. I've been calling for this sort of pricing for a while. I hope they stick with it for the week-to-week events as well. I mean, these top-end guys should be more expensive. You finally see it. We got Scheffler at 12, what is he, 12.5. You got Rory at 11.9. You have Rahm at 11.2. A lot of times you're only seeing maybe one or two guys in the low 11s, and it comes right down to the 10s. But I think the most important part about this pricing is what you covered today on the Mayo show, and I kind of overlooked a little bit. I think it's by far the most important point is that 7K range, okay? So you have to play mind games a little bit with yourself, because a lot of the guys we typically see in the 7K range are now in the 6K range. So I think there is going to be a built-in advantage in roster construction today, because a lot of people naturally say, oh, I don't want multiple guys in the 6K range because, you know, they're high volatility type guys. Well, those guys that are in the 6K range this week are typically guys that are in the low 7s. So I don't know if people are going to adjust the way they build their teams, adjust their rules, but I think people should be doing that this week. So it's a very good point. Like, I honestly, like, I didn't think about it. I was cutting the grass this morning listening to you and Mayo, and that's the most important part by far of this entire thing with the change in salaries. And again, I hope they do it each and every week, tempt people to go down to that 5K range. I think there are viable 5K guys that we will talk about on this show. But the most important part about this salary change, to me, by far, is those guys in the 6K range. Those aren't 6K guys.
Right.
Those are 7K golfers. So that to me is the most important part by far.
And just to rehash it quickly, because what it was is for these past few weeks, we've been looking and seeing guys in the 7.5 to 7.9K range be very popular, and for good reason. But what was happening was we would say the way to get different is the 7 to 7.4K range is getting almost no ownership on any one guy, and we'd have 30 to 35 guys just in that range. This week, what people missed, I think, or not a lot talked about, at least that I heard, and I listen to mostly everything, read mostly everything, is that there is only 30 guys in the entire 7K range. And why that is important is because I think while people are focused on which 5K guy can I play because it exists, is that all these guys in the 6 up, especially the upper 6K range, even 6,500, 64, 63, all these guys could have a price tag of 7K flat or 7.1. Yeah. Some of them could be 7.3. If Robert McIntyre this week, who we're definitely going to have a conversation about, was 7.4K this week, nobody would bat an eye. There's lots of guys. If Grillo was 7.3K, no one would say anything. Lucas Herbert is 7,000. I guess he's on the number, but just going down again. Jordan L. Smith, 6,800. Alexander Bjork, all these guys we played last week in that 7K range, they're still playable. Not much really changed beyond the field, got a little bit stronger, and it's a major. But my point being, it's not like we're going to the U.S. Open or the PGA Championship or something like that where it's qualifiers and AMs and all these players down. I mean, these are the same guys that were in play last week with a very strong field. Now, the field did get a little bit stronger, and maybe you could argue that's the price difference, but it's not really that much. And the bottom line is this: there is only 30 guys in the 7K range. So if people are not comfortable going to 2 6K guys or 3 6K guys, you actually can this week, no problem. And that would be one topic of conversation around a guy like Bobby Mack, who's going to round out a ton of lineups and round out a ton of optimals, especially for high dollar, smaller stakes or the 4440 mega, I'm sure. But you can definitely use him as your 4th or 5th guy in. If you're playing guys that are right behind him, he would be your 4th. If you wanted to go like a Bjork, Smith, McIntyre, well, he's technically tied for the second last because he's the same as Smith, but just say it: Grillo, Bjork, and McIntyre. Now he's your 4th guy in as opposed to your last. Also, you could just play one guy behind him. You could play him with a balanced build as opposed to using him to get you up to Scotty or Rory. So I like what Hoop said. There's definitely a lot that comes with this pricing dynamic. I like it better. There's more outs. There's more ways to get there. There's probably more mistakes that can be made where people are definitely trying to get a little bit too aggressive. And I always talk about this with PGA DFS, but essentially you're building a 6-game parlay. In some cases, you can correlate it a little bit. That's why I like the wave stacking at any event, because I think that's where some people don't realize you're correlating in the way that you're avoiding potential weather. If there was a spot like this where we know tomorrow looks pretty good and Friday looks pretty good, but also Friday could change in an instant, and we will know Thursday pretty much when we get to lock, you could definitely do it and then just hope it goes your way on Friday. That's if you have more lineups, but I'm just saying that's really the only way we can correlate. We can correlate by stats. We can correlate by tee times, things like that, but not much else. So when you're building out this parlay, and then now you have a situation to look at where, okay, well, if just Lee Hodges and Ewan Ferguson and Richie Ramsey come through, well, then I got Rory and Scotty. Well, yeah, but first of all, you need Rory and Scotty to be the guys. Obviously, they're the two best in the field, the best odds. They look like they could be the guys. A repeat of last week would do just fine for you. But oh, wait, there's more. Now you need Richie Ramsey, Ewan Ferguson, and Lee Hodges to all come along, make the cut, and score after the fact or find their way up the board somehow. And don't forget, there's a sixth man on your team as well. So somebody else needs to come through also. So you see what I mean? Where you're making it, you can be, in some instances, making it more difficult on yourself, doing it that way. Anything else to add here, Hoop? If not, let's dive into these tiers.
No, again, I hope they stick with this pricing moving forward. These top end guys are just so good, and they should have higher price tags. And I do like the temptation of playing some of these cheaper guys. And again, my main point's going to be people aren't going to adjust. And again, those 6K guys are typically 7K guys. So that's the one thing that I think people need to be cautious of when you're building your teams today, especially guys like, you mentioned a few, but obviously McIntyre's a total misprice, but Jordan Smith, he could be in the 7K range. You talked about Griot, Poston, guys like that. Like they could all be Dietrich. We've seen Dietrich much more expensive. He's 6,400. So it's just I don't think people are going to adjust when building their teams.
And the prices are just thrown together to that note too. You just said, like when Dietrich was 7,400, now he's 1,000 less. But Bjork is only 500 less. Like, you know what I mean? Like they flip them around for no apparent reason when it comes to that stuff. So that's where, again, you can just look to take advantage of it from that perspective. Cabriolet 67 said definitely better when you're on when tourneys are live. This is for our round 3 show. So yeah, we'll probably do that on Friday. It's a lot of fun actually to just go by the leaderboard and see it. We'll know more about the weather at that point for Saturday. Like that's definitely a good way to do it. And then Marquee Music said, why do some projections like Jay Day? I don't know, actually, to be honest. And when you go to our projections, I have them up here now. He is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Like there's like 5 guys around him that the projections like better. So I don't think it's going to reflect. But again, that also reflects on our stuff, at least in the ownership. We have Jason Day somewhere around 6% as far as ownership. I think that sounds about right. Even if there was a little bit of late steam because some projection sets like him, who cares? Like 6 to 8. That's what I'm saying. You're not changing your mind on pulling the trigger if Jason Day was 6% or 8.5% at the end. It's not that big of a difference. If you like Jason Day or you want to roll with him, play him, but that's just something to think about. All right, Hoop, let's do this. Let's go up top. We got Scheffler down to Hovland. That was another thing this week that I like about it too. We got 7 guys, 10K and above, and it makes these choices pretty tough because then you also have Cantlay, Fowler, Spieth, Morikawa right behind Hovland. But let's start 10K and up. Hovland right up to the top with Scotty Scheffler.
Yeah, this is one area that I do like the new pricing because you got to make tough decisions. Like if you want to play Scheffler and Rory, who, I think are kind of in a tier of their own. Obviously, Rory's been, coming off the win, been playing solid top 10 machine. And then you have Scotty, who's been a top 5 machine for 5 months straight. It's just absolutely incredible. You just have to imagine come Sunday, like one of these guys is in contention. Like it just, I wish there was some sort of bet out there and I don't even know what the odds would be, but just to say that, at least one of these guys is within 2 shots going into Sunday, because I would just fire on it super hard. And I guess the odds probably wouldn't even be all that good. It's probably a favorite, but man, it just seems super likely that both these, or at least one of these guys is going to be in contention. The hope is that the bigger price tags kind of scare people away. And it does look like that in terms of ownership. From what I'm seeing, both these guys right around 20 range, like low 20s, maybe even upper teens. So I think the new pricing is working in a way that, if these guys were, let's say Scotty was 11,000 and Rory was 10.8, you're probably looking in like the 30% range in terms of ownership. The fact that these guys are up here, I think it keeps their ownership in check, and it's still easy to get heavy exposure to them. The interesting one's Rahm. I think the ownership probably even lower than some of these sites are projecting. I could see them maybe closer to like 10%. I've played a lot of Rahm. I want to get exposure, but the only weird thing is like, why hasn't he been playing at all? Like, I know you follow a little closer. Is there any reason why he hasn't been playing much?
The thing is, man, the weird part is this is a conspiracy theory, but in the back of the head, I don't think it's happening. Just the point was like, the member he came out and said the thing about with Liv, and he was like, I'm so thankful for what the PGA Tour has done for me, regardless of what happens. And then people all of a sudden ran to be like, oh, he must be going to Live. And people said that he was the reason that they ended up partnering up because it was a top player in the world was about to go take a big offer. And so everyone just auto-assumed it was Rahm. Rahm obviously pissed off with some of the stuff with the Rory and Tiger show about how they run everything, and he's not the guy to talk to, even though he's a bigger name in the game. Not than them, but a bigger name compared to some of the others. He still doesn't get included besides Rory and Tiger, who obviously everybody knows are always going to be included in those conversations. So I don't think that has to do with it, but I do just think in general, it's kind of irrelevant. It's 11-2 for Rahm. It's another major. I just think people aren't talking about him because Scotty and Rory are right there. And even though it's $700 to get to Rory, same as it's $700 to go from Scotty Scheffler to what his usual price had been, 11.8 in the past weeks. I don't think people are worried about it. I think he's still going to get a little bit of late steam here. It looks like 14% on Jon Rahm. Yeah,
I mean, to me, that's probably too low. But guys that I can easily be off, like Cam Smith. I mean, the wildness off the tee, I think is enough for me to stay away from it. And 10-7 just seems steep. It seems like a steep price tag for Cam Smith. It really does. Like to me, he's like an upper 9K guy. Now his ownership's going to be low, but man, he's got how confident I am in Scotty and Rory. He's going to have to put up a big boy performance this week to compete, and I just don't see it happening. Brooks, I feel like you're either a Brooks person or you're not. I just typically don't play a lot of him. But where it gets tough for me is this next tier of guys, and I'm going to go down to the 9K like a little bit because I kind of view all these guys pretty similarly. Xander,
I think like Morikawa and up seems like the same conversation. Yeah.
Like Spieth, I think no thanks there. I think something's going on, but like Morikawa, Fowler, Cantlay, Hovland, Xander, like it's a group of 5 guys that if you're playing a lot of Scotty, if you're playing a lot of Rory, and if you want to get exposure to Rahm, you can't play all these guys. So I personally think like what you do in this decision is probably the most important decision of the week in terms of roster construction, because 5 really good guys, 5 guys that definitely could go out and win this week, 5 guys that are for the most part playing solid golf. I don't know, man. Like this is the hardest area for me. Like, Cantlay's coming off the miscut. And I do think, I talked about on the first look, you've talked about it as well, the fact that he's 9,900 instead of 10K, I think people maybe just naturally go to him a little bit. Fowler's been playing great. And then Morikawa, I need some help in this range. Like, what's your take with these 5 guys? Because I think it's super important what you do. I'm like lost here.
Yeah, and I was looking at one thing quick because you'd asked about it. I thought it was funny. Again, it's not quite the bet you were looking at, but you can bet these things called dual forecast. You can actually do straight forecast where you pick the guy that's going to be 1-2. But instead of building, like earlier today on Mayo Show, we talked about Rory and Scotty lineups. I think if a Rory Scotty lineup gets there, it's them 1-2. Like it's a runaway. And then you also need other guys to not come through. Like that's why I just have a tougher time with it. Obviously, you can make them look good. You can put your favorite guys in with it and feel good that at least it's the 4 cheaper guys you feel comfortable with, but you can bet those guys at 40-1 in a dual forecast. I think I would be better just to do that than burn any lineups on. I know that could pay more if you get it right, but you just need so many things to go your way versus if you think they're going to finish 1-2, why not just bet it 40-1? It's either or. A dual forecast is either one of them finishes first, one of them finishes second. Just for those that don't know, a straight forecast is where I say Rory beats Scotty Scheffler, and it's like 65-1. And again, how good do you think those odds are? I'm not advocating it's the best bet in the world. I'm talking comparison to trying to find the best Rory Scotty lineup. I would rather just go about it that way and just pick your guy at the top here if you're picking one. Projections really like, surprisingly, Brooks Koepka over here with us. So that's one where sometimes you just got to trust the projections because guess what? I don't see him getting any crazy late steam or anything. I think the fact that you have the guys up top who are already getting, marked down a little bit. I've got Scotty somewhere in that 17-18 range. Rory in that 20 to 22, probably on the lower side. I just feel like he always still gets clicked. And when people see the savings of Scotty to him in their hand builds, it makes more sense there. I'll talk about guys I like more in a second. But then the other thing is you have Xander, who always gets a little bit of love regardless of price. Hovland, who's actually getting talked up quite a bit, and projection sites like him. And then Cantlay, who projection sites love. Ricky's been playing really well. So I just don't see. It's going to be spaced out. But I like Scotty. I like Rahm. Rahm is a guy I just always play. I know what's happening. I know here's the common sentiment too. I already know what everybody's saying because I listen and watch everything. They're saying Rahm's going to get clicked too much at the end when people realize it's a guy that you can get lower owned. But even if he does, like it gets him to what, 14.5, 15? I actually still don't have that as a bad play when you've got the other guys below him. The guys like Xander, Hovland, fine. The one thing about Brooks that stands out, I guess the only thing I could say on that, again, it's tough to gauge, but the first part is not tough to gauge. The bigger one is how much we see him and what he's been doing lately. It's been great. But this is Rory's, 9 years now since his last major. Brooks has won 5 majors in that time, including one this year. Yeah. So you look at that $1,500 price break from Rory to Brooks, and then you go to our projections, and our projections have them both pretty close. Even though Rory is projected for more, the value on the Brooks savings is something it likes. So I definitely think that's something to consider. I like Rahm. I like Hovland. Those are kind of the two that stand out there. And then if I'm going down into the 9K range, who I like Spieth and I like Fowler the most. Spieth and Fowler.
You like Spieth, huh?
Yeah, his open record is something that this is what stands out to me about it is, first of all, his open record's incredible. But second of all, is even in his tough times, his worst seasons where he was having, what was it, like a 2.5-year downward spiral of doing nothing, he was still showing up at the Open. And this is the least, this is not even why. This is not, sorry, Brandon, this is not at you, everybody. It's just the laziest thing. Brooks is playing with Cantlay. He's playing with Cantlay, which he bitched about at the Masters. Like, we know this stuff. We follow golf basically for a living. That is not what concerns me. If anything, here's the opposite side of the argument. Brooks is one of the most cockiest, try to be alpha type dudes and wants to go out and say, you know what? Everyone thinks I can't play because of Cantlay because he's too slow. Watch me. And last time he said he literally adapted. This wasn't with Cantlay or behind Cantlay, but when he went out and won the major after that event, he not only made up for it, he said, I know what I learned from it. Last time I let shit bother me. This time I didn't, and then won a major. So you can argue it just as much both ways. It's not Brandon. I'm taking it out on everybody saying the same thing and ask that question. If Brooks Koepka has a bad week, it's not because he played with Cantlay. That's just not going to be it. It's just he's going to go in pot bunkers. It's not going to go his way. Maybe wayward with the drive. The putts aren't dropping, whatever it might be. That's a lazy excuse or narrative that people will put out there. It has nothing to do with it. Honestly, maybe you could stack them both. Maybe that's your lineup, Koepka, Cantlay, to start it off and roll it out. Like that to me, two guys that you could play. I just, like I said, the Spieth record stands out for me. And going back to it, I have it here. I just want to pull it up so we can go through it quickly. But Spieth at the Open, 8th, 2nd, 20th, 9th, the win, 30th, 4th, and 2 more made cuts back in 2013 and 14, which is kind of when he was just really getting the ball rolling back then. So in general, that's some incredible stuff at the Open no matter what. People say about the driver.
Wait, who did you say that was?
That's Spieth.
Spieth, yeah, man.
9 for 9 made cuts, a win with 4 top 10s.
Was that the Open with what was it? Him and Kuchar battled it out at the end? Was that the Open?
The win was where he went out of bounds and then had to get the ruling, and he got the ruling in his favor. That's it really stung Kuchar, and then he came back and took what probably was maybe, I don't know if it's I could probably say it's the last shot Kuchar would have at a major. It just seems like, I don't know. Anything can happen at any time, but that was definitely his major to be had. Who knows how long we'll be saying this about Ricky Fowler for, but he's in good form, and he's the other guy that I like right here. And he's another one that, again, last 2, he didn't even play it last year. 53rd the year before that, but then it was 6th, 28th, 22nd. He's got seconds and fifths. He got second here back in 2014. And then also, just his recent form of obviously the win, 13th, 5th, 9th, 6th. He's just been playing really good golf, sets up well. His swing has just been better all around. So Ricky, Spieth, Hovland, Rahm, Scotty, that's kind of the guys up top, the most at least that I'd have interest in. So anything else here that you're thinking, or anybody else that you want to talk about?
Yeah, it just kind of comes down to roster construction again. If you're going to play, you're going to have to embrace some of the 6K guys if you're getting a lot of exposure up here, and maybe some 5K guys, which, is kind of the route that I'm leaning. And it's just, again, I'll just reiterate that range, like Hovland, or honestly, Xander down to Fowler. I think what you do there is very important this week. Yeah.
The thing too is, what was the other one I was going to bring up? Hovland. Someone talked about this today, and we were talking about it earlier on the Mayo show, was that, 4th and 12th here the last 2 years, this season, been playing incredibly well, even better than before. And when you look at the price difference of Hovland at 10K versus some of those guys at 11.9 and 12.5, is he having they're all having great seasons. Best way to bet. You can't really say is he having a slightly worse season because they're having great seasons. I mean, Rory getting the win besides Abu Dhabi that he had earlier in the season, people weren't even really giving him credit for that. At least Rory just picked up the big win last week. Scotty should have more wins, but the point being, Hovland has still been in the mix. And then I don't have it in front of me, but Hovland's majors this season, I believe, are all top 10s, right? I think it's a 9th, 7th, and a 4th.
So out of that 4, so you got Xander, Hovland, Cantlay, Fowler. Your least favorite would be Xander, probably, or Cantlay.
Probably still Xander, even though I kind of like him too. It's Xander or Cantlay. Cantlay because he always comes with the ownership, and some of it can just be based on the pricing and whatnot. And again, projection sites like him. But what else? He was 8th last year, but before that, a miscut and a 41st at the Open. His results, he's got a mixed bag: 14th, 30th, a miscut, and a 4th. Again, stats wise, he fits the course amazing. But so do the other guys, to me, just as much. So I like I said, I like Xander, Hovland, Ricky, Spieth as the 4 guys, Rahm and Scheffler up top, and then trust the projections, Brooks, Koepka. Like I said, I think I always have no problem playing more guys in the upper range anyway because you're just messing around with 2v2s. I guess I have a harder time with like the Morikawa ownership and narrative that go with it. Again, it's not like he's getting crazy ownership. I've got him somewhere at 12 to 13, but it's mostly based on, I think, the fact that 2 years ago he won and people are comparing it to that course. He's coming off a 2nd place. Stats fit it. I get it all. I just feel like there's so many guys there. And then you also have to talk about this next range, which is a good segue. We can go into it and you can circle back if you want to, but Fitzpatrick, Hatton, Fleetwood, DJ, Lowry, Cam Young, some easier than others to cut here, but Hatton and Fleetwood, Hoop, have been playing really good golf. They were both on your winning team last week as well. Mine too. So Fleetwood and Hatton at 94, 9,300. And then there is some thoughts to be had around a guy like DJ, 6th and 8th at the last 2 Opens, lots of top 10s in his history here, playing really well on live, et cetera, et cetera. So what are your thoughts on this bottom 9K range?
Yeah, I mean, the Hatton Fleetwood thing, I mean, you and I both, I think, have kind of been riding these guys for a little while, and the results have been great. I mean, Hatton's playing better than I think I've ever seen him play. I mean, consistent over this stretch. I mean, the results have just been absolutely incredible. 6th last week, 27th, 3rd, 12th, 15th. Like he's on a mini Scotty Scheffler run, like add 10 places essentially. So Scotty's finishing 3rd and 4th basically on average every week. Hatton's averaging like 13th or 14th place finish for the last 3 months, which is absolutely incredible. A little more volatility with Fleetwood, but he's been just as good. And getting closer to the top in his finishes. 5th at the U.S. Open, he was 2nd at the RBC, 6th last week. Both those guys, phenomenal plays. Dustin Johnson, I do like quite a bit. Correct me if I'm wrong, but the ownership really hasn't been all that high on him in these majors. I mean, I don't know if it's the lives thing or whatnot, but I'm going to keep playing him. I think this course does set up really well for him. 9,200, I think, is a fair price tag. He's been playing pretty well on the live tour. I mean, I don't put a lot of stock into that, but it's something that you shouldn't be ignoring fully. So in on him. Lowry, I think, is a fine play. Cam Young, people are trying to make the case for Cam Young, and I get it. He's going to be super low owned, but I mean, come on, dude. Like, he did good at the John Deere Classic. Like, he's not back. Like, if he does all right here, then okay, yeah, he's back a little bit. But what you do at the John Deere, doesn't do shit for me. So I'm going to pass on him. Fitzpatrick, I think, if you do like him, you're going to get him at low ownership. It would not surprise me if he came out and did really well here. He's been all over the map this year in terms of, his finishes. So if you like him, he's going to be low owned, not for me. And then Morikawa is another tough one for me. I mean, I kind of put Morikawa in that category. Like, if you play Morikawa, typically stick with him. If you don't play him, probably stay off him. And I typically don't play him. So, he's a guy I'm going back and forth on. Like, he's kind of in that lower 10K, upper 9K group where I still don't know what I'm going to do with a lot of these guys, but really prefer that bottom range, like Hatton and below. I think some really good plays down there. Ownership is going to follow with Hatton and Fleetwood, but nothing stands out as like too high of ownership. Yes, like when we get down to Robert McIntyre, that's like an interesting conversation because he's clearly just the most mispriced guy on the slate. After what he did last week. But everyone else, like, there's nothing that stands out like super high owned. I mean, everyone's looking to be 25% or lower. So there's nothing in that 30 range. So A lot of good plays here, man. I mean, just a lot of good plays and guys that are tough to avoid.
Yeah, the Hatton Fleetwood thing, and you can do this too. Like you could, I know people are going to start lineups with them, but you could do that again this week, Hoop, where you can really just say, I don't have to dig down and figure out who the 6K or 5K guys are. I don't have to worry about going up to the top. I'm just going to play the guys that will hopefully do what they've been doing and make cuts and give me a floor upside combination. I could even see like a Ricky Hatton Fleetwood lineup where you don't have to make the decisions on the Xander Hovlands. You don't have to decide on Cantlay versus the guys above him. Don't have to worry about, is Spieth going to be too errant with the driver, or do I have to play Morikawa? Is it his week? Any of that stuff. And you just play the 3 most consistent guys and then hope the guys at the top don't come through. But that's my point always, like, again, if they do come through, you're in big trouble, right, when that happens. So I do definitely think there's something to be said for that. I think it's also tournament dependent. That's another thing, Hoop, that you can really use projections for. You can see the lineups to say, okay, what's this look like for a large field tournament versus what's this look like for a higher dollar, smaller entry, based on how many, what you think you're going to get from duplicates from it, or, what the total ownership looks like, or the product ownership, even if you want to balance that out. So I could see where you could use that to your advantage here. This type of lineup feels more like a higher dollar, smaller field, because somebody in that large field $25 Millie Maker is going to have some combination of craziness down at the bottom, right? If you have a setup where it ends up being Matthew Southgate and Bobby McIntyre who get through, and Scheffler wins, I mean, that someone's going to have that trio together. And so then it's just a matter of getting the other 3 things right. Not saying a bunch of people will have it, but just saying when you get in these large field tournaments, that's where you see people taking on more of that volatility. And that's why I brought it up earlier, when you know that with some of the guys that you're playing here. DJ is the interesting one, 9,200. I got 2 guys on this slate. One is him and one is Bryson DeChambeau, who we'll get to later, where we could just look back, right, and say like, wow, why didn't I just play more of that guy? Like I was just, he was fair price or he was underpriced for how this thing sets up. And that is the other kind of thought here too, Hoop. The 8K range is full of names, which we'll get there in a second, not jumping ahead, but Clark, Justin Thomas, Burns, Homa, Finau, my guy Sungjae. We're going to talk about that range, but it does feel like somewhere around Dustin Johnson up. So DJ, Fleetwood, Hatton, whether you like Fitzpatrick or not, whatever, but Morikawa, Spieth, these guys, where it's kind of like Koepka down to DJ, I'll say. So 9,200 to 10.4, where it's like, remember, this course, we didn't talk about this off the top, but it is a little bit greener, a little bit softer. Michael Kim just posted on Twitter his 3rd thread of the week, where he's kind of breaking. It's not even a thread, actually. It's a great use of Twitter Blue, where he uses the extended long-form content, and he says that he thinks there'll be 64s out there tomorrow. He said, don't freak out. He knows me and Mail were joking about this today. He must watch DFS golf shows or something, because he's talking about wave stacking. He's talking about the people on golf Twitter freaking out when everyone goes super low on day one. He says, don't freak out like the U.S. Open. He expects it to firm up and weather to be harder over the weekend, but don't be surprised to see low scores tomorrow. And that is the one angle, just going back to the very top, where Koepka down to DJ, at least in my opinion, this range, can really just keep pace and outscore Rory, Scheffler, Rahm, any of those guys, because they can only do so much too. Scotty Scheffler can go off this week, but still only put, and let's say DJ's the guy he's battling with. Well, you may need both, but if too many of these other guys come with him, and I think this is where our guy, Bader Bear in the SHIPIT Nation Discord, and I'll bring him up again because he brought up a great talking point. That's what our Discord is all about, strategy, not this guy versus that guy. Can this happen if this happens? What would it look like if this happened? How would this build look? We love talking about that stuff over there, and I think this is a better way to talk about it, because it's like, this is where, if there is that much scoring to get to 15 or 16 under, it's not a U.S. Open where the best score may end. Well, this year is a totally different story, but in the past, where you'd see like 2 or 3 guys under par, and those position placement points become so much more important. And what I mean by that is these are the guys where these ranges could all outscore and get there. So your balanced builds using 2 or 3 of these guys could be the way to separate yourself. And instead of maybe building in wave stacks, Hoop, you could build in sets where you get your guys up top in a certain amount of lineups, Scotty, Rory, Rahm, especially with like Rahm. 20% Rahm is pretty good if he's going to be 14% owned, right? Yeah. Something like that. You're still fine, and you've got Rahm lineups. Pick your poison, Scotty or Rory, and then build some of these balance lineups down here that are kind of heavier balanced. You're not going completely, 2 low 9s and that. I'm saying you're getting like a Brooks Koepka and a Hatton instead of a Hatton Fleetwood start. And then you still have some upside and some win equity, a major win equity guy in Brooks Koepka built in, that they could still keep pace, even if Scotty is charging up the board and find your way around there. So again, if Scotty wins, I just think he's still in the winner. But in that case, I would say that this is a way to beat him if he still has his standard top 3, top 5 type finish with the price tag associated. So that might be the better way to put it. Anybody else in this 9K range you want to mention? If not, let's move on. Let's go to this 8K range. Justin Rose up to Hideki Matsuyama, who I bet at 100-1 with 8 places. Because really, we always talk about this hoop, like betting versus DFS. Oh, yeah. It's just like he's still just as good in DFS at 8,900. I think he's fine. But I wonder what our projections. I didn't see exactly what they had Hideki at. Not the worst, not the best in that range. I will say that. There's guys above and below they like more. But just saying it, I also worry a little bit, like I teased this earlier, if you did put an injury designation on Hideki, there might be like 3 of them. Like he neck, back, and then Kenny Kim, my guy from Fantasy Golf Degenerates, posted out he's doing like a twerk type stretch on the range this morning or whatever. Like he's really trying to get his game in gear, but wrist and neck and back and shoulders and whatever. It's scarier from that perspective if you got something like a $200 single entry or higher, maybe up to the mega, 44.44 or something, to have a guy like him in there. Again, no risk, no reward maybe, but at the same time, that's where it does get a little bit scarier. In something like the $25, I just jam whoever because I don't care about that stuff. But for more money, you kind of want to feel a little bit safer with it. 100-1 with 8 places I thought was pretty interesting. And I know you said you got on Team Tambo this week, and you bet my guy Sungjae Im. What was the number you got on Sungjae? And then take us through this.
So I got the DraftKings sent out like a little boost thing, like an extra plus 300 on any guy that you wanted. And I started going down the list, and I saw Mr. Sungjae sitting there at 100-1. I was like, well, 130-1 sounds pretty nice on our boy Sungjae. I mean, there's, again, he's struggling, but there's legit win upside. So, yeah, I fired a little bit on your boy Sungjae at 130-1. And I don't know what the number is around the industry, but that sounded pretty good to me. So in on him. For DFS purposes, though, this range will be pretty low owned. I think the highest owned, you're going to see Finau get some ownership. You're going to see Rose probably get some ownership. But the way people are going to build teams, this range just has to be overlooked. I don't like a lot of these guys. Like I get the Matsuyama bet at 100-1, similar to the Sungjae bet at 130-1. But, I'm not going to be on Hideki at this event. Just has not been playing well. I get the Bryson thing, just not really for me. I'd rather just play Wyndham Clark, who I think is really taken a leap forward this year, playing phenomenal golf. 8,700. I think he has a chance to go overlooked too. I think, again, everyone in this range, no one's going to be over like 15% owned in this range. Burns, just not a Burns guy off of him. Home, I do like at 8,400. I think it's just a good price tag on Home at 84. Starting to see some signs of life. He played pretty well last week. Finished 12th there. Didn't really have a good round 4. Outside of that, he was 68 or below every single round. So I'm in on him. I'll play some Sungjae. Really low ownership, and I know we talk about it every single week. Now it's at the point some play showing like less than 5% ownership on Sungjae.
I got him at 6.5 right now.
Yeah, like I'm in on that. Like, yeah, he missed the cut last week, but got to play a little. 8,300. That's literally the cost of the average roster spot on DraftKings. Actually, a little bit below than the average roster spot on DraftKings. 8,300 in there. Finau, 82. I get it. Like, I'm going to play a little bit of him. I'm not over the top excited. I know a lot of people are loving him this week. For me, it's just like a price point thing. 8,200 again. And now these guys are lower than the average roster spot. So in on him. Not like over the moon. Tom Kim showing some signs of life at 8,100, had the 6th place last week. I think it makes sense to go there. And then Justin Rose, probably my favorite in this range. If Rose has a good week last week, he's probably very, very popular at 8K flat. Like he'd be, let's say he finished like 15th last week. He'd probably be one of the more popular guys on the slate. Misses the cut, has the 8K price tag. I think we see him at pretty low ownership. I love Rose, a lot at 8K. So a range I'm not going crazy on, but I'd say, really like Rose. Finau's good and Homa as well.
And projections line up there. They kind of like those guys as well. Shout out to my guy EG Bader's in chat. Corey says, did I miss the giveaway? Just got off work. It'll be announced on our Twitter after. Again, at SHIPIT Nation on Twitter. Go there. We will announce the 2 monthly pass winners. We will get them in before this evening. So the 2 winners will get access to the content for this week for the Open. So just to let that be known. Let's see this. Mark, anything for the CUDA? No. Until DraftKings does something for the CUDA, I won't. I know you'll say, but wait, you can go check right now, Tambo. There's contests in there. No. 10K to first and $100 to 10th. I'll not be supporting that. Last week, I put like 5 or 6 lineups in there, maybe 8 to 10. I can't remember. I was just burying them in at the end and just afterwards looked at myself like I was a loser. So definitely not going to be continuing that. And they'll say, oh, how can they grow? It's not even a trial. Like I'll see, maybe talk to the guys when I'm at the 3M this month, but we got to get better stuff than that for these alternate events. We can do better, but not going to support until they're actually good enough. My focus this week on the Open, the best tournaments, the best contests, all the big time prizes, all of that stuff. Doesn't matter what your bankroll is. Not my bankroll is too big for this or something. There's amazing contests for any bankroll for the main one. So I'll support that and continue to fill it. I love my guys at DraftKings. Do what I can to support the CUDA contest. Embarrassing. All right. Who else? Let me just go through my guys here. Homa, Sungjae, buy low. I'm definitely getting back in on Sungjae. I think he's fine at 8,300. Finau, Rose at the bottom. Up top, I didn't have as much besides Bryson. And the one thing I will say about Bryce, I know it wasn't for you, but I'll just bring it up. I wonder, again, same thing. Projections don't hate him, actually. And compared to Wyndham, who's getting a little bit more steam, we'll see how it actually shakes out. But I do think that Wyndham can get some late steam and Bryson might be okay. But one thing someone pointed out this week, I didn't have a chance to clip it and get into the tidbits on Twitter, but just to say, they pointed out that he has actually been clubbing down a lot lately. And so the thing about that on this course, and Mayo and I were trying to go through this today on the show, there's a thinking man's course, which any link style course is set up like this, experience, all that stuff helps, definitely. But then there's an overthinking man's course. And I don't think this is that to me. Like, it's pretty, to me, the decision is off the tee in what you do. Like the conversation around 17, what people are going to do there. The conversation on if you see pot bunkers, are you going to try and carry them? Which, by the way, Bryson can. Or are you going to lay up from them and keep tight and then come in from there? I think he's okay enough to cover it around those greens. There's runoffs and stuff like that. Maybe you don't have to worry about that as much. Flatter greens. Maybe he can putt a little bit better. And he has had times where he does find it with the putter. So I'm not saying it's my favorite. I'm just saying at 8,800, I think you could be fine going to him here. And I don't think very many will. I've got him coming in around 6-7% right now. So I think that's at least interesting for the fact that he has a complete game. And then he's been playing better lately as well, right? Like, what was his, I don't know if I have it right in front of me, but I thought, so even at the Opens the last 2 years, 8th and 33rd. And then I just don't have it in front of me for what his last two were. I can pull it up in 2 seconds, but I think he did pretty good for these events. Could have done better at the U.S. Open as well. Yeah, 4th at the PGA Championship, 20th at the U.S. Open. Missed the cut at the Masters, but we always said that's where, people were going after him that year. He gained all that stuff with the balls, with the driver. But then they realized, oh, yeah, there's a bunch of other factors. He was first round leader, by the way, but then just fell apart. But then the Open before that last year, 8th place. So, I mean, he's been in the mix in these spots. So I actually don't hate him for that reason. Think for these large field tournaments, especially, an interesting play there. Let's move on, though. Let's go to the 7K range, smaller than normal, like we talked about at Hoops. So you can cover it however you want, but 7,900 down. What are you doing here in this 7K range?
Yeah, it is interesting because this is a range where it's usually just the most call outside of 6K. I mean, 6K is always going to have the most, but this range is usually loaded up with guys much smaller, a lot of appealing options. You got Scott, Gooch up top, Jason Day, the people were asking about earlier. I honestly, like with Day, I think he got his win and he's kind of good with that. And that's been the case. He has not been good since the win. Like, yeah, I mean, sure, play him. I'm not. Like, no thanks. Minwoo, Corey Connors, love Corey Connors. Bad, didn't play great round one, and then kind of turned it on and had a really solid 4th round last week that I know propelled me way up the leaderboard. So I'll be going back to him. I think Patrick Reed at 7,600 is a guy that stands out. Has been playing really well on that on the Live Tour over there. 7,600 fair price tag. I think the course kind of sets up pretty well. Neiman, I don't know. Neiman's a guy I haven't decided on. One of the last guys I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to do with. Ryan Fox, I don't think I need to say anything. I am playing Ryan Fox. I mean, I don't see any reason not to. A lot of people in the Discord. We get new
viewers every week, Hoop. You have to tell them still. He's your guy.
A lot of people in the Discord are claiming that I have some sort of stock in Ryan Fox's career.
Yeah.
But again, you look at it and he is just much better than his price tag ever is. So I'm just going to keep playing him, and the money continues to rack up with Ryan Fox 12th last week. I'll be all over him. Henley, solid option. Denny McCarthy. Brian Harmon's Brian Harmon is like a streaky type guy. Like when he's playing well, you want to play him, and he is playing very well right now. Second at the Travelers, 9th at the Rocket Mortgage, 12th last week. I think he's a solid option. Moronk, I believe missed the cut on the number last week. That could lower his ownership a little bit, but prior to that was playing very solid. Then there's some interesting names down here. I just don't think many people come in the low sevens. I think they just go down to the sixes. Adam Schenk, been playing very solid golf, 7,200. Gary Woodland, Chris Kirky, and then Davis Riley and Benny On are some guys that I'm looking at here. Viable options, but again, the main thing here is this range is much smaller than it typically is.
Yeah, that's a big factor, and I think that's the other thing too. Like someone asked earlier, 7.8K left, single entry, Connors or Lee. So first of all, Connors is probably the highest owned guy in this range. Yeah. I have him at almost 16%, just over 16% right now. So I think that's probably about right, somewhere in that range. We'll see how it actually shakes out. Higher than that in the bigger tournaments for sure. He's just a safe play that people will go to. Oh, Minwoo, I'll just hop to him instead then. I think he's going to get steamed up too to like 8 or 9%. So definitely think Minwoo's coming in right behind him there. The two guys for me, another guy that has similar steam, but I think for good reason, that's at least interesting, Hoop, is Adam Scott. And he missed the cut on the number last week. But before that, you talk about the Fleetwoods and the Hattons and all these guys. Again, don't forget, we're talking 7,900 guys here. So 5th, 8th, 29th, 9th, 19th with only one missed cut. And then last week missed it on the number. Like that to me. And then you go to his open form, 15th and a 17th in 2 of the last 4 years. Before that, though, 2nd, 3rd, 5th, 10th, 22nd. Like this guy is definitely fine on these style courses. And again, you say, oh, but he's only going to give you a top 30. He's only 7,900. That's the point. Like, I mean, you can talk about upside all you want. I don't think these fifth, like I'll go back to it too, because I forget exactly the places we brought it up today. Because I think even Mayo had said something similar to me, and I, respect his opinion. I just say like here, like 19th at the Travelers, 9th at the Memorial, 5th at the Wells Fargo. Like this is the one I use with them, the Wells Fargo. We give the Wells Fargo, Wyndham Clark, Xander Schauffele, Tyrrell Hatton, and Adam Scott. Fleetwood, same as Adam Scott. To me, I'm not just basing it off that. That's not the reason. I'm saying, but just to say it that way, to say he doesn't have upside, well, all those other guys probably do have more upside, but they also cost a lot more. So that's the point when you go to a guy like Scott here at 7,900. I think he's just fine. Keegan Bradley, Reed, the creative types. I think that could be something you find there. Neiman off the tee. Definitely like him for that perspective. I like your Fox call. I mean, there's a lot of guys. This is just showing again, though, why we'll get to the 6Ks, and there's definitely playable guys. But I think, again, even with there being less guys here, I could definitely just round out my lineups in this 7K range. I don't love the guys at the bottom as much. Like you mentioned, like Shank, Harmon, McCarthy, Norin. I just don't love all that range. Not that you mentioned them all, but just to say it. I like Gary Woodland always. I like Benny Ann. One thing that Woodland I brought up earlier with Mayo that worries me a little bit is just how much will he actually score? Because if it is getting to 15, 16 under, he's not really that guy. He's more like the grind it out, like even one day when it's tough, 3, 4 under the next day, and there he finally makes the cut and we get what we want out of him. Then it's like, one bad day, one good day. Is that going to be enough? Mind you, 7,100. I like your Fox call. I like Henley. I like Siwoo. So 3 guys up at the top, 3 guys in the middle, 3 at the bottom. And I guess the last one would be the 10th guy, Benny Ann, would be someone that was brought up in the chat earlier. I know a lot of Straka and Herbert talk and things like that, but I think Benny Ann still gets a little late steam, and that's okay. But at $7,000, a late add to the field, technically, I'm more than fine going to him here. And I was just trying to pull up his incoming stuff. Just give me 1 second here. It should load.
Yeah, I mean, I think Benny Ann's a good play. I mean, I've been playing a lot of him this season. And what he got hurt for a little.
He got hurt for a little bit there too, and then coming off that was a couple of missed cuts. But then back out 51st, not that good, but a third. Before that, though, he'd been a 14th, a 21st, a 24th. His stats line up quite well, and then a 32nd and a 26th here the last 2 years. So I definitely think that's possible.
Yeah, we kind of touched on this earlier, like the Rory Scotty thing. If they happen to finish like 1-2, there's definitely paths where they're not on the optimal. We've seen it before where it wasn't John Rahm where he won an event and he wasn't on the winner at the end. Like, so yeah, that stuff can certainly come into play. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, I think the only time for me that it really comes into play, and I'm pretty sure that was the one you just brought up. That's another one. I believe it was the U.S. Open that he stole away from Louis at the end with that crazy bunker shot where he decided to chip out to the side to then make the long putt. That's fine.
Yes.
But that's, again, what people are forgetting. That's why I brought up today, and I'll say it again. The U.S. Opens are way different. They have nobody playable at the bottom. There's like 50 guys that are U.S. AMs, qualifiers, pros, things like that, like at the PGA Championship, same way. You're just Xing those guys out. And that's the flip side of the Masters when Corey Connors comes through at $6,800 because you're knocking out 25 guys, old guys, previous champions that are just there for the history of it all. So both guys, definitely. And that's why I said, rather than playing Scotty and Rory together to try and find the combo to win $1 million, it's fun to do a few of those if you want. Burn $100 and try and find 4 of them. But I'm saying you'd be better off just to jam it in at 40-1 if you're truly getting that, because for that to happen, not only do I think you need them to be the 1-2, which pretty obvious, but you also need a bunch of other guys at the low price point to not only make the cut, get you some points, get some scoring, find their way up the board, and then have those guys come 1-2. I would rather just bet them 40-1 to finish any combination of 1-2, even though I don't think those are probably the true odds of what that should be. We'd have to calculate that all out, but I'm just saying I'd rather do that than the other. So Kirky was the one guy I did like down there that you mentioned that I thought was at least a little bit interesting, coming in off of 14th and a 21st. He can find his way around a course like this. The score is fair to get to for a guy like him. Like maybe he's a better play actually than Woodland, to be honest, just because just looking at, again, Woodland's open form, miscut, 67th, 70th, similar results coming in a 25th and a 33rd. Kirk's coming in on a 14th and a 21st, not the best open history himself, but this type of setup, this course, I think could be better for him. 42nd last year, stat profile pretty good, so I don't hate him at 7,000. I like Benny Ann better, though. So anybody else in the 7s? If not, take us into the 6K range, Hoop.
6K range is definitely important this week. We talked about it. A lot of these guys could easily be in that 7K range. A lot of guys down here that I think are, definitely in play. Are Remain. Is it? What were we saying last week?
I think we were calling him Caesar salad, romaine lettuce.
Yeah. And then we threw lasagna in there. But 6,900. Played well last week, 25th. I mean, Robert McIntyre, $6,800 is going to be very, very popular this week. When you do play them, I think you employ the strategy that you always talk about, not who you play, it's how you play them. And then also be cautious of the contest that you enter as well, because the ownership will vary most likely. Higher you go up in stakes, the more owned this guy will likely be. I always play him, so I'm sticking with him, obviously, but I get if you want to fade. I mean, a lot of people are saying, well, anyone that's in the 6K range that's going to be popular, I'm going to fade him. Well, this is like a different situation, though, because he clearly should not be $6,800. He definitely should be in the 7K range. Been playing really, really well. I think it's a different situation than that for sure. Jordan L. Smith is a guy to look at. Bork played well last week, finished 35th. There's just a lot of guys down here. Padraig Harrington has been playing some phenomenal golf. Hasn't missed a cut in forever. 27th at the U.S. Open, 42nd last week. I believe I maybe shit on him last week when we talked about him, but man, it's tough to ignore. Yeah. See, you remember.
Patty the baddie, man. It wasn't even a great finish last week. I'm making fun of it, but in general,
we always talk about it with these guys. You want them to make the cut and have a chance to get into like the top 20. Can he do that? I mean, the way he's been playing, I think so. Poston, Putnam, Thomas Dietrich, Lee Hodges, I like quite a bit. I mean, we talked about Lee Hodges a ton. He had a couple missed cuts at the Travelers and the Rocket Mortgage, but 3 under. So it was not like he was playing terrible golf. He just didn't make enough putts. Last week bounces back with the 12th. I had a lot of him last week. Juice Luton, someone in the chat was asking about, I'm in on him. The person said it. Here it is. In their 20 max, all in on Juice Luton. So that is literally the definition of max leverage. You said you're looking for the max leverage. You got it. All in on Juice. No one can have more than you. So I do like him. Henrik Stenson is a name a lot of people are talking about. Playing pretty well on Live. Yeah, I mean, 6,200. I don't hate that. Ewan Ferguson, really solid result last week, finished 12th. I played a lot of them last week, way more than the field. 6,100 I mean, this is a guy, if it's normal pricing, like we talked about, he's probably like 67, 6,800, all the way down at 61. A lot of guys. And then I know you guys talked about this guy earlier, or at least Mayo did, Ben Griffin, 6K flat, playing pretty good, 33rd at the Rocket Mortgage, 25th last week, 6K flat. So I'm interested in him as well. A lot of guys in the 6K range that are in play for me.
Yeah, and Ducky, congrats. This is the one I was thinking of. I think I mentioned US Open today. I think it was the PGA Championship, but this is what I'm talking about. Again, it's a PGA Championship, a US Open, more likely for what you're saying to be the case. And he said it wasn't a bottom feeder. That's the point. If the balanced guys get up there and the most expensive guy is also up there, but there's not a lot of combinations to get there with it. The argument this week, and I'm not going to go through the whole rant again, but is that to Hoop's point and where we're at right now, so it's a perfect segue to talk about it, is there is so many playable guys in the 6K range. There's likely to be scoring opportunities. These guys will make the cut. They'll end up being on that. And then if you have a Scotty and if Bobby Mack does his job, which I'll talk about in a second, then you're really going to be hard-pressed to find those balanced builds that beat the guy just because he's a little bit more expensive up top. That's where it becomes a little bit more tricky. Is it possible? Absolutely. Why is it more likely is the case that I'm more unlikely is the case that I'm making. Marquis says Els looks good at the bottom. If by good, you mean correctly priced. Yes, that's right. He does look right at the bottom. And then top old guy, Patty versus lefty. Damn, that's pretty tough. I got to go with my guy, Patty the Batty, though, man. I don't care what we get on a fill and which fill shows up. I still like Padraig Harrington. I really do. So back to the Bobby Mack conversation, Hoop, like you mentioned. I think that's what I was trying to explain in our Discord, too. On paper, going to be a horrible play when he's, 20% owned, let's say he gets to, and he's probably not even 20% to top 20 this field. So it's like that's the angle you can look at it from that perspective. But if you truly believe he's the value, here's the thing. If you knew Bobby Mack was going to be a top 40 for you right now, you'd probably feel pretty good coming in. And then people say, oh, but he's too owned. But then you go and look again, who knows what he'll do this week, but last 3 opens, 34th, 8th, and 6th. Last 6 results, 2nd, 4th, 39th, 18th, 14th, with 1 missed cut. So basically beyond the 34th at the last open, his other 2 were top 8s or better. Beyond the 39th 3 weeks ago, he had 1 missed cut, but then the rest were all T18 or better with almost a win last week. People won't give it this enough credit. What Rory had to do on the last hole was incredible on the fact of that, on top of get there on set. Like Rory needed to get that out. 17, 18, 17, an easier hole. But still, he did what he had to do to then get through and then close it out. That shot on 18 was just insane. And he probably feels bad, but not really. Rory's there to win. Maybe you could say that Bobby Mack got his heart ripped out, so that's just an automatic miscut. We'll see. But I know why people are playing him. We talked earlier, not going to rehash it, ways to get different with him. If you start with him, get different. Maybe you use Bobby Mack and then don't go above 10K. You just use 3 9K guys or 2 9Ks and 2 8Ks and whatever you have left over. Like there's other ways you can build with him that you don't have to go the norm. Again, tournament size dependent. Like if you're playing in a large field tournament, you may want to get unique with Bobby Mack. Maybe in the $25, you make sure all your lineups have someone beyond him and he's a 4th or 5th in all of those lineups. You can do stuff like that. It doesn't mean it's right. I'm just saying if you're looking for angles in, I think there's no problem with that.
And the other thing with this week specifically, like there's not really chalk. Like no one is over the top popular. Like you're looking at the highest owned guys. There's no site out there that has anyone listed as higher than 25% owned. Okay. So there's it's not a typical week where, okay, well, if someone's playing Bobby Mack, they're automatically going to have this guy in their lineup. Now, when you get down to the 5Ks and we talk about some of these guys, like, okay, yeah, maybe you can say that. Like this 5K guy is probably going to, if you play this 5K guy, a lot of people are going to go ahead and play Scotty Scheffler with him. I think you can make that connection. But with Robert McIntyre at $6,800, I don't think you can make the direct connection between him and another player specifically. Yes, if you have the 6,800, it's more likely you're going to have someone above 10K in that lineup. But all those guys are getting a little bit of ownership. No one's standing out as the play. If you're afraid of ownership with Bobby Mack and you want to play a guy up top, to me, you should play him with Jon Rahm. I think you should pair him with Jon Rahm if you're trying to avoid some of that stuff. But I wouldn't be overly worried this week. I mean, it's very spread out, very spread out.
Yeah, great point there. And that's the other point of the pricing being so different, which we talked about off the top, is that's where, like you said, lots of spread ownership here. So you don't have to worry as much about that. Too many times you'll see a guy play, Bobby Mack's going to be 17. Let me just play Phil. Phil was good before. And then you're like, but you liked Bobby Mack. If you like Bobby Mack, you can play him. There's plenty of ways to get different with him. Couple other guys. One guy that's still getting a little bit of steam just above him, but Louis Oosthuizen. So of the live guys, like I mentioned, DJ, Bryson, forgot about Taylor Gooch. I did want to bring him up. He was solid at 7,800. He was the guy I mentioned about Scott. I said there was two guys up top. The other one was actually Gooch, who I was going to mention there at 7,800. I like him as well. I also like, who's the guy you mentioned, Stenson at the bottom. And then I like Louis Oosthuizen here at 6,900 as well. So I think Louis is fine. Jordan Smith, maybe. Again, the guy cannot putt, but just maybe on these flatter greens gets a little bit better. From that perspective, Grillo easily could have been 7,300. And I'm not saying I would have been all in, like heavy on him. I would have definitely considered him still. Now at 66, there's less to consider. I mean, it feels like a better option. JT Poston is sitting there at 6,500. He actually had an okay week last week. He's back-to-back sixth places now coming in at 6,500. I don't hate that. Putnam is a guy you could find coming in. Like there is guys down here. Taylor Moore won earlier this season. I like the Lee Hodges call. You mentioned him. My guy Baroff brought him up. He said, again, another guy that if he makes the cut, he can outscore it. And you go look at his results recently, he's got a couple missed cuts, but beyond the missed cuts, 12th, 25th, 29th, good finishes in some of these events. Or some of them are easier, but still in general, definitely think he's a guy you could go to. And then Stenson at 6,200 down at the bottom, playing better on live, great open history in the past. And there's a little bit of motivation with him where we talk about the RNA and the Ryder Cup thing, and he was the captain and he went to live. So they pull his spot, and now maybe a little something to prove, a little something to push back with. I definitely think he's interesting at 6,200. Anybody else in the 6K? If not, we can round up the show. Last 4 or 5 minutes here, Hoop, with the 5K range.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of guys in the 6 for sure. And 5K, I think there's a few viable options. First one, Richie Ramsey made the cut last week. 42nd place. Now you're getting to the pricing tier where you might not necessarily need these guys to finish in the top 20. We talk about it with the 6K guys, like you want them to make the cut, get into the top 20. Now you're coming below 6K, roster construction gets a hell of a lot different, when you're playing, a $6,700 guy versus a $5,800 guy or $5,900 guy. So Richie Ramsey for sure at 5,900. Siem, if that's how you see him, however you pronounce it, Marcel from Germany, 5,800. Been playing very solid. I mean, making a ton of cuts. Finished 42nd last week. I'm definitely cool with him. And Antoine Rosner at 5,800, I think, is an option down here as well. And I think that, and then Southgate. I mean, you guys talked about him a lot on the show this morning. You and Mayo did. $5,600 for Matthew Southgate. I mean, that's a cheap price tag. Now, what does that mean in terms of roster construction? I touched on it a second ago where, if someone's coming down here, they're likely going all the way up to the top. There's no doubt about that. But these guys are so cheap down here where it gives you the ability to automatically have a unique roster construction, even if you are going with a guy like Scotty Scheffler up top. So I think he's a fine option at 56. I mean, it's just I hope DK continues to do stuff like this because it's a new dynamic into the game. And I'm going to play some of these guys down here for sure.
I'm probably going to play less of these guys. I think really right now my guy is Ramsey, and I'm going to do what I always say down here. I got no problem with you playing them. Sorry, not Ramsey, Rosner. But my thing is, just when I look at it like this, I think the reason I like this pricing dynamic is people will go here, and then it becomes almost an extension, Hoop, of what I've been talking about the last couple of weeks with 6K range in general. And when you get to Scottish Open and the Open, it becomes 6K range and 6K range with Euro guys. And what I mean by that is when people can pick their point. Oh, I know this guy from the DP World Tour. I played him. I want to play him. What's my, who can I go to here? You start to see people overplay certain guys. And it's okay if you're doing it and they're your guys. But if I play just Rosner down here and just take my stand, and I leave out Southgate, I leave out Ramsey and Siem and all these guys, if Rosner has a good week, I have multiple versions of Rosner in lineups, balanced versions, Scotty versions, a ROM version, whatever it looks like to make it work, plus the balanced ones. I've got outs with Rosner having a good week. If I don't do that, I end up having, if I hadn't used Rosner and just went down the $200 to Southgate, I could have went up from this guy to this. I could have went up from Dustin Johnson to Hatton, and I would have had the winner. Like, I just never want to put myself in that spot. I want to have outs. to get there. And the way to do it is to just take your stands on the ones you are playing down here. He's the guy that stood out for me. I talked about that on the Mayo show this morning. So I think he's interesting. And then other than that, not too much for me down in this range. I think, again, doesn't matter though. Like even Mayo was talking about Southgate and people loving him. He might get to 3%. Like I just no one's gonna play.
I don't even think it's going to be that high. Like people are going to just
these are sprinkles. Everyone's just sprinkling a little bit of everyone, and if it comes through, they hope they got the right combo with it. So you know. And then Paul, you asked about. You can always just rewind back, man. We went through every range, talked about the guys in the low end. Definitely talked about Siwoo and Henley. Like both of those guys myself. So any other questions you guys have, just throw them in. Hoop. Final thoughts for this week. Final thoughts. SHIPIT Nation. We got a lot going on over on the site.
Yeah, so over on the site, you know, some of the content's already starting to drop. We'll have the core report, myself, Tambo's main core, and then the cash core listed in there. The cash core is already complete and up on the site. Then we have our tier rankings, which, man, if you just built teams off the tier rankings last week, you would have absolutely smashed, you know, between yours and I's, and then the, you know, projections, the top two for the projections, just on point. My player pool, it's basically my top 30 guys. And then my personal exposure to those guys, that is up. I'll be tweaking the exposures a little bit as I built my teams, but I did put some preliminary exposures in there. And then I highlight all the cash plays, guys that I think are cash eligible within those 30 golfers. And then your slate plan, which gives an additional 2 cores, and then your full breakdown of how you're building your teams. And then the big thing that we added this week that we talked about a little bit, the PGA projections, which we're very excited about. I know you've been testing those for the past few weeks. They had Rory last week as the top guy, and they've had a lot of solid hits along the way. So we feel comfortable enough to release those, and I think people are going to absolutely love them. So a lot of content for just PGA. This is just for the main slate. Then we have content for showdowns as well. Round 2, round 3, we'll have video, and then we have our player pool and cores, and then for round 4, player pool, and then our cores as well. So a lot to like just in terms of the PGA product. Then we have all the other stuff as well. We have our normal MLB content, NFL coming, best ball, MMA has been an absolute smash so far. Yeah. And then NFL is right around the corner. So $59 for a month, and then $599 for the annual package. It's the best deal in the industry by far.
Yeah, and it only gets better because we continue to add things. That's where people forget, right? It's anything. We started with MLB and PGA, and people are like, oh, is that it? We already added MMA. We've added stuff for best ball. We're now adding more things that we didn't have with the current sports to start. And we haven't even got to NFL, which everybody knows is the biggest sport in this industry. It's going to be incredible. If you guys haven't yet signed up, go to shipitnation.com. Check it out. Less than 100 likes. So do us a favor on the way out. You probably forgot. It's okay. We forgive you. Hit that like button, little thumbs up down in the bottom right corner. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I think we got another 15, 20 subscribers this show. We'll take it. Anybody that hasn't subscribed already, though, do us a favor. Subscribe to the channel. Get access to all of our free shows throughout the season. There's going to be a lot more coming from here on out. So that's going to do it for this one, though, guys. Final major of the season for Hoop and for myself, ToeTagginTambo. Let's ship it!